Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, India officially blaming Iran for the January bombing outside the Israeli embassy in New Delhi. Meanwhile, we begin the official 2021 elections countdown with an in-depth look at the religious Shas and UTJ parties. And finally, we commemorate the 110th annual International Women's Day with some good news and goals for the future. We begin tonight with unfortunate news of two attempted stabbings. The IDF stopping the suspected terror attacks overnight and this morning. First, residents of the Sde Ephraim farm reporting an attacker armed with a knife trying to stab the farm owner's wife. The attacker was neutralized by residents of the farm, however, and security forces have since taken over. Meanwhile, this just hours after Israeli troops conducting an arrest raid Sunday night in the Palestinian city of Tubas. There, a suspect attempted to stab one of the soldiers during the raid. Thankfully, though, the soldier only sustained a light hand injury and was treated on the spot. The assailant, on the other hand, unfortunately, was likewise shot and neutralized. Now, in other news, Indian media reporting a bombshell this week, claiming that investigators officially blame Iran for a low-density explosion detonated outside the Israeli embassy in New Delhi on January 29. January 29 being the 29th anniversary of establishing diplomatic ties between India and Israel. And joining me now with more, senior analyst from the Abba Eban Institute of International Diplomacy and former head of Israeli Intelligence Services, Iranian Strategic Branch, the Reserves Major Danny Citrinowicz. Danny, thank you so much for being with us. Now, how do investigators supposedly know that this was a Shiite terror cell aided by Tehran's Quds Force, as the article accuses?
Well, I think they probably looked for the explosion itself. They look at the mechanism itself and compare that to other information that probably they had. And I think they were also assisted by intelligence officers from Israel, for example, that really helped them tie the knot. And I assume that they have strong information because such a blame is very unique. So I assume they have a lot of evidence that really indicate the fact that Iran is behind this attack.
So what are the next steps in this investigation or prosecution?
Well, first, it's interesting to know we are now really missing information regarding this attack. So we still don't know who were exactly the attackers were. There are rumors that they were local Shiites that were drafted in Iran, studying in Iran, Indian one, and they being sent back by Quds Force to commit this attack. So first, we need to know more information. It will really help us to understand the modus operandi of this attack, and maybe it will help us to detect any attacks in the future. That is one thing. But an even more important one is what will happen with the political ties between Iran and India. So in the past year, there were the disalignment really got strengthened, and we saw an important ties built between Tehran and New Delhi. But this explosion can change the trajectory. So we still need to see how the Indians will respond to this attack, whether they're going to do something regarding the diplomatic ties with Iran, maybe deporting some elements, Iranian elements in India. We still don't know yet, but this is extremely important, and we still wait to see what will be the next steps of India.
So what justice, and I know that you said that there is still some information missing, like the exact identity of the perpetrators, but what justice can Israel and or India expect in a case like this?
It's hard because at the end of the day, those responsible for this attack are local Shiites probably. So it's very hard to blame those who send them. Probably those who send them elements in Unit 400 of Quds Force are still staying in Tehran. And of course, they won't come to New Delhi for a trial or something like that. So at the end of the day, only the locals will be there to blame. But again, we'll have to wait and see how the Indians will take that and whether they will demand, for example, the Iranians to maybe meet with those who think that they are in charge of this operation. So again, we still have to wait and see whether India will take it to the next level.
I see. All right. Major Citrinowicz, thank you so much again for joining us, and I hope to have you back when we know more about this attack.
Thank you. Good evening.
For weeks now, tensions continuing to rise between the United States and Israel and Iran. But Israel and the United States now teaming up in a show of force against the Ayatollahs in Tehran. Israeli F-15 fighter jets seen escorting 2 American B-52 bombers through Israeli airspace on Sunday. And this shows strength coming after multiple alleged Iran-linked attacks targeted at the U.S. and Israel across the world. Recent attacks including several missile strikes on American military bases in Iraq and an attack on an Israeli-owned ship in the Gulf of Oman. Though according to the United States military, the patrol flight was intended mostly just to deter future aggressions and to reassure American allies of the United States' military commitment to maintaining security in the region. Now moving on, just 15 days left before Israel's 2021 Knesset elections, but despite heading back to the polls for the 4th time in just 2 years, many of the parties in the running are either new or renewed. So we thought it'd be a good idea to remind you what the different factions stand for, and we begin with the ultra-Orthodox Shas and United Torah Judaism parties. Currently serving with 9 and 7 Knesset seats respectively, ultra-Orthodox parties Shas and United Torah Judaism together form what Israelis commonly call the religious Knesset bloc. But while often lumped together as a right-wing pair for continuing to sit with the Netanyahu coalitions, the two parties do differ on some policies, and they represent different swaths of the Jewish Israeli electorate, neither traditionally left nor right. Shas, for one, led by Interior Minister Aryeh Deri, was founded as the party for Sephardic or Middle Eastern Jews, and many of its voters are traditional, modern Orthodox, and ultra-Orthodox in practice, with Shas campaigning on protecting the religious and cultural heritage of Sephardic Jewry overall. To that end, Shas has worked with parties across the spectrum, establishing government-funded religious education systems in poor Sephardic towns, opposing the division of Jerusalem, pushing for increased Jewish religious law in Israel, advocating for living an ultra-Orthodox lifestyle, and opposing Israeli settlement freezes in Judea and Samaria or the West Bank. United Torah Judaism, or UTJ, meanwhile, was until recently led by Housing Minister and former Health Minister Yaakov Litzman, but it's now under Moshe Gafni's leadership. And as a conglomerate of 2 smaller parties, UTJ mostly represents Ashkenazi or European Haredi Jews' interests, like preserving the religious Jewish legal authority in Israel. UTJ differs from Shas, however, in that it characterizes itself as a generally non-Zionist party, with more concern for religion than security or diplomacy. For example, UTJ was party to the 2005 Gaza disengagement and has no uniform opinion on Israeli settlements in the West Bank. Still, UTJ and Shas do greatly influence one another and more often than not vote together, which brings us to the controversies that both parties face. For one, both Shas and UTJ have a long history with corruption charges. Former UTJ chair Yaakov Litzman is being accused of manipulating the psych evaluations for alleged rapist Malka Leifer, and police recommending indictments against Shas head Aryeh Deri in 2018 after he already served time in prison for similar charges in 2000. Meanwhile, the public largely blaming the Haredi sector for a lag in Israel's coronavirus response and growing misinformation campaign. Former Health Minister Yaakov Litzman himself falling ill after breaking quarantine restrictions last year, while Shas was fined by the Elections Committee for handing out prayer cards at polling stations that claimed to cure coronavirus and other illnesses. Then social policies not winning many popularity contests either. Both parties abjectly opposing any public expression of homosexuality, rejecting the court's recognition of gay marriages performed abroad, and also rejecting the role of women in politics, arguing that Jewish law dictates the separation of gender roles. And finally, most recently, both parties are fighting hard to reverse the court's recognition of non-ultra-Orthodox conversions to Judaism. UTJ having even run a campaign ad over the weekend likening non-Haredi Jewish converts to dogs. All right, life appearing to be slowly but surely returning back to normal. Government officials even claiming that coronavirus lockdowns may be a thing of the past. ILTV's Alyssa Hugel has the details.
Israel reopening much of its economy Sunday, including restaurants, cafes, school grades 7 through 10 in low to medium infection areas, event venues, tourist attractions, and hotel dining. And the government is now also promising that no new lockdowns or restrictions will be enforced prior to the March 23rd elections. In spite of coronavirus health expert Nachman Ash warning that reopenings can lead to another rise in infections. In fact, the government continuing to ease enforcements on the streets as well, with Ash himself saying that the requirement to wear a mask outdoors is largely unnecessary and suggesting that it would not be enforced by the police. However, in order to avoid mass confusion, health guidelines will continue to require masks both indoors and outdoors. Meantime, Prime Minister Netanyahu also spreading optimism, saying the pandemic is largely behind us. But the vaccination campaign is in trouble, particularly in Arab Israeli communities where the virus continues spreading rapidly amidst rising conspiracy theories and fake news. In fact, Arab Israelis are already making up half of the country's serious COVID-19 cases, despite being only 21% of the population. And health officials now especially fearing the upcoming Muslim holiday of Ramadan, as a holiday normally includes month-long festivities and gatherings. On a more uplifting note, though, Palestinian workers in Israel are taking their shots, with Israel kicking off their vaccination campaign following a successful pilot on Thursday where 700 Palestinians were vaxxed at the checkpoint between Jerusalem and the West Bank.
Now, on the outside, Israel's green passport program seems like the instant fix, but behind the scenes, opening the economy back up after over a year of uncertainty actually involves a lot more than just a flick of the switch. And with that in mind, many industry leaders are still taking the more careful approach to reopening. Here to explain is General Manager at Jerusalem's Hotel Inbal, Roni Timsit. Roni, thank you so much for being with us. Now, you are planning to reopen your doors March 24, but what does reopening exactly look like to you?
Hey, reopening is, first, we are hoteliers, and hoteliers like people. And taking care only of ourselves was a little bit tough for the 6 last months. And we are happy to come back. Coming back is meaning that we will open already the pool and the gym room from the 15th of the month. And after we will reopen the hotel for Pesach, like you said, on the 24th. And after Pesach, we'll reopen also our specialty restaurant, meaning that we want to come back with the full activity of the hotel. We couldn't open before. We think that to reopen a big hotel, a large hotel, we need a little bit more time. Bringing all the people that are very important for us. And we succeed to bring back almost all our employees. And that was very important. It was a bit challenging at the beginning, but finally we succeed to bring everybody back. And that's very important to have a good service and good feeling for our clients.
Well, so I want to ask you, I'd love to know what you expect the initial turnout to be in terms of clientele. Do you expect the hotel to jump back into the swing of things quickly, or do you think that this is going to take some time before you start seeing more regular business?
Okay. First, regular business will not happen so quick because regular business for the Inbal Jerusalem is 90% of tourists.
Oh, wow.
Most of them being Americans. So this will take time. But we are reopening the hotel for the local market, for Israelis. I think people cannot go outside the country. Israelis didn't have too much the opportunity also to know the hotel because the tourist market was booking well in advance, and most of the time getting to the time of booking of Israelis, the hotel was full, and we didn't have the opportunity to show the hotel to the local market, and that's very important, I think, to be part of the community.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's a big mission, and it sounds like you're taking it on in full knowledge of how big this mission is. Yeah.
In our small place, but I think that if everybody is going for that, the country will be back, and there is good signs, and we need to show that the economy is moving.
All right. Well, Roni, good luck to you and the Hotel Inbal. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much.
All right, now some good news for pregnant women and new mothers. Following troubling COVID-19 cases amongst pregnant women, a new report is now claiming that pregnant women who recovered from COVID-19 or who were vaccinated will likely pass on that protection to their children. Health experts are saying that women can pass antibodies to fetuses in the womb and to their babies through breastfeeding. And while this news offers optimism, it is generally known that children can receive different types of antibodies through nursing. And to confirm that this is true for COVID as well, researchers at the Providence Cancer Institute in Oregon analyzed milk samples from a group of 6 mothers, half of whom received the Moderna vaccine and the other half of whom received the Pfizer vaccine. And the study is showing that no adverse effects were discovered amongst the babies. So again, while further research is definitely necessary, it appears safe to assume that for now, mothers are likely passing antibodies to their children. In other news, today officially marks International Women's Day, and in spite of the ongoing pandemic, women from across the globe still came together to commemorate with a huge swell of positive messages and challenges for the future. Hannah Rifkin with the story.
It's the 110th annual International Women's Day, and this year women are continuing in the tradition of calling attention to the needs for equal rights by issuing challenges for the world to live up to. Voices from around the world once again shedding light on just some of the ongoing issues plaguing both women and humanity, like tearing down military dictatorships in Burma, increasing women's presence in Sri Lankan politics, and even just eliminating discrimination and violence targeting the most vulnerable in our societies.
Namaskar, my name is Yogita Bhayana and I run a campaign called Pari, People Against Rapes in India. I wish our country, our streets should be safer for our women, for our children, and in 2021 we should see no cases of sexual violence and all the perpetrators of previous cases should get punished.
Soy Frida Guerrera, defensora de mujeres, niñas y niños en México, cronista de feminicidios de todo el país. Para este 8 de marzo, lo que deseo para las mujeres es justicia, equidad y sobre todo que dejen de asesinarnos.
But of course, many messages were also focused on women's social and economic welfare, like paving the way for more female leaders and representatives in business, science and technology, research and development, sports, and other male-dominated fields. Israeli chair of Jerusalem's famous Machane Yehuda market, for one, challenging women to follow their dreams and to make sure to dream big.
מאחלת לנשים ברחבי העולם בשנת 2021 לצאת ולהעיז ולהצליח ולחלום בגדול. אני חושבת שהיכולות שלנו הן לא רק שהן שוות ליכולות של גברים ברחבי העולם, הן יכולות להיות טובות עוד יותר. צאו החוצה, העיזו והצליחו.
But mainly, most just calling for freedom and the right to live their lives.
بالنسبة لإلي كأم كفرد من هالحملة وكفرد من هالمجتمع يلي قوانينه عم تظلم الأمهات والأطفال بالطائفة الشيعية بشكل يومي، يوم المرأة العالمي ما رح يكتمل وما رح أقدر أني أحتفل فيه بلا ما ترجع حقوق هول الأمهات وهول الأطفال.
Hallo, mein Name ist Ceylan Ateş. Ich bin Anwältin, Autorin und Moscheegründerin. 2021 wünsche ich mir für alle Frauen auf dieser Welt ein freies, selbstbestimmtes Leben.
In related news and in honor of International Women's Day, women of strength in Israel working to give motivation and strength to other women and girls who need it. But to shed some light on the daily issues that women do face, as well as to give us some needed words of wisdom, we're joined by founder and senior advisor to the El Halev organization, Yehudit Siddiqman. Yehudit, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure to be here.
All right, now I understand that you have a story which inspired you to found El Halev. What inspired you to form the organization and the center the way that you have?
So I was abused as a 12-year-old by a member of the clergy in my small Jewish community in New Jersey. And that's not the whole story, because as I grew up, what I realized was that he had stolen my childhood. And finding judo and then finding women's self-defense became that process that helped me heal and returned my voice and my body to me.
So that's how you gained the courage and the strength to take control back?
Yeah, it's more than that. See, there's a point where when you are controlled by others, especially as a young child, you lose your connection to what you want. And that's manipulated and used by others to get what they want. So while my story isn't terrible and horrible, I thought I was in love with him. We were 6 years together from 12 to 18. Like I said, he stole my childhood. And what we've learned over the last 2 decades at least is that many times girls lose their connection to their voice and more importantly, their inner voice when it comes to being able to share what they feel at about age 12.
All right, so what is the best way that we can prepare our daughters when it comes to the reality of potential abuse? How can we make sure to keep their minds and their bodies strong and prepared to fight back or to recognize the signs and leave?
So the best skills we can give our daughters is practice. Practice making decisions as to what's good for me, what feels right, where are my boundaries, and respecting when they set them.
All right, so what advice do you give to young girls and to women that may be in a similar situation now to what you went through? Is there a message that you want to pass to them?
So we have, in Judaism, we have a wonderful piece of knowledge that I think we kind of miss. If I'm not for myself, who will be for me? If only for myself, what am I? If not now, when? If I'm not for myself, this is the greatest gift, my body, my soul, my personality, my talents, that I have been given to get through this world. It is my right and responsibility to take care of it and to set boundaries that feel good for me. And yet, we don't want to be selfish in the world. We want to give to the world also to build the world a better place. So if only for myself, what am I? My what in the world comes from what I can give. And I have to make these decisions every minute of every day. If not now, when? So have these conversations with your children, especially your daughters, and show them that their choices and what's good for them is meaningful to you, that you want to hear what they like, what they don't like, you want to support them in the ways that they need to grow to be themselves. We also teach to educate a child according to their path, not according to your path. Give them the skills they need to negotiate complicated relationships along the way.
All right, so many important messages here. Yehudit Siddiqman, thank you so much again for joining us.
My pleasure. Great to be here, and happy International Women's Day.
All right, finally, major news for the Israeli pop sensation Noah Kirel. The teenage Kirel getting set to both produce and star in a coming Hollywood film. Kirel reportedly wrote the film with her team and pitched it to American producers, eventually getting it picked up by the Picture Start production company. And the film apparently telling the story of a young woman in a globe-spanning escapist event. But the news marks yet another major international achievement for the 19-year-old star following Kirel's multi-million-dollar music deal with Atlantic Records. Additionally, Atlantic Records is set to produce the soundtrack for the coming film. This as Kirel simultaneously works to finish her debut international album and single with that same label. All right, now let's take a look at the weather forecast with Chana Rifkin.
Thanks, Aaron. So we're looking at partly cloudy skies tonight and tomorrow, with the lows this evening dropping to about 49 degrees Fahrenheit or 9 degrees Celsius. Then Tuesday's highs calling for an average of 74 degrees Fahrenheit or 23 degrees Celsius. Back to Aaron in the studio now.
All right, thank you, Chana. And now, before we go, let's take a look at what's going viral in Israel. Now, you may not be able to tell, but Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu just called, as promised, this young person who was vaccinated to promote Israel's vaccine campaign. His end of the conversation was, of course, published on his social media, and she posted her reaction. Here it is. Love him or hate him, he is still Bibi. All right, that is it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.34 shekels to the American dollar and 2.63 shekels to the Canadian dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just don't forget to visit the all-new and improved ILTV website at iltv.tv and to subscribe to our newsletter for the latest updates while you're there. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you so much for watching.